Welcome to Secure the Perimeter podcast. Today's episode, we will be talking with a living legend, Dakota Meyer, United States Marine, received the Congressional Medal of Honor, the first living Marine to receive the Congressional Medal of Honor since the Vietnam War. Dakota Meyer is also the recipient of a Purple Heart, which means you were wounded in combat. So today we're going to unpackage his story. We're going to talk about what he's doing now and the way he serves transitioning veterans and his causes. So thanks for tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you guys on future episodes of the Secure the Perimeter podcast.
Welcome to the Secure the Perimeter podcast.
Welcome, everybody, to the Secure the Perimeter podcast. With us today is a legend, a former Marine, a colleague, as I would call him, in theater, Mr. Dakota Meyer. If you don't know Dakota Meyer, he is a renowned Marine, served with 3rd Battalion, 3rd Marines, was involved in a very heavy fight in Ganjgal, Afghanistan in 2009, and the first living Marine beyond the Vietnam War to receive the Congressional Medal of Honor. So, Dakota, thank you for joining our Secure the Perimeter podcast, and welcome.
Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah,
I'm really
man.
excited.
Yeah, Semper Fi, man.
I knew you had to be a Marine to accept a podcast at 5:30 in the morning.
Yes, sir. That's right. That's how we roll, right?
That's how we roll.
Good stuff, man. So listen, I want to get right into it, Dakota. Your story is very important to me because I want to convey this message to a lot of Americans. And I know you're involved in a lot of different programs, and I know you're an advocate for a lot of people. But today, man, it's just about having a conversation, not only about your story of how you joined the Marine Corps, which I'm very familiar with the recruiter story all the way through, but I want people to hear it because it's very similar to how I joined the Marine Corps. It was that fire and tenacity of being told that you can't do it, right?
Yeah.
So talk to me about your journey, man. You know, like the switch. What was the switch for you when you first were introduced to the recruiter? What made you make the decision to join the Marine Corps?
So I joined when I was 17. I grew up in a small town and it was I was your typical high school student. I played sports. Sports were kind of like uh my only reason to even probably graduate high school. I wasn't into really education. The way that the public education system teaches, it's not made for people like me. So look, I showed up and did it because I had to, but sports were kind of like coaches were kind of my kind of like my probably the only education I got was from coaches, right? And so at the high school level, and I was gonna go to college. You take back in 2006. We didn't have all this. We just started with the cell phones and we didn't have this digital age and didn't really know what the opportunities were. And for us, really,
Oh.
you either went to college, or you which is what the public education sold you on, right? Like to get a better life. If you didn't want to have to be that guy working on the side of the road, you had to go to college. And so which I was going to try to do. I knew there was no chance I was going to get through it. And this recruiter was, standing in the back of this classroom or in the back of the lunchroom, like they always did. They come in, they put these tables up, and they just catch the most traffic during lunch and talk to kids and tell them about the opportunities. And there's a recruiter there, and I went up to him. I had no clue. I had no clue about what even a Marine was. And I went up to him, started asking him a bunch of smart aleck questions, probably doing it to try to impress some girl, to be honest. Um, and he like looked at me and he went back and forth for a little bit. And you're talking 2006. I mean, this guy, for him to be a recruiter and gone through recruiting school, he's in Fallujah, right? And he's standing over here with his huge, he's got more ribbons and medals, and obviously I didn't know what that meant. And I started asking him, and I'm like, "What's that?" He's like, "Oh, it's my shooting badge." I'm like, "Oh, well, I mean, we hunt, so that's nothing." And went on and on, and he's like, "What are you going to do when you graduate high school?" And I said, "Well," I puffed my chest up. I was like, "Well, I'm not going to do what you're doing. I'm going to go to college." And he's like, "Yeah, that's what I do too, because there's no chance you'd ever make it as a Marine." And I walked off, and I think for us, I think that's why the Marine Corps is so good at recruiting is because they know their audience. Like like the people that are there. I mean, there's a type of person that joins the United States Marine Corps, and they know how to speak to themselves. And so, you know, you talk about at a time of joining. Right after so I joined with him, signed up with him, and then obviously the National Guard guy was always trying to hit me up, and they're giving bonuses. You talk about back in that time frame, all the other branches were giving bonuses
Yeah, yeah,
except for you
yeah,
get to be your bonuses, you get to be a Marine, right? And we
yeah.
would still do it. We would still join it because we wanted to be part of something that not everybody got to be part of.
That's right.
And so that's why we joined the Marine Corps. And so I joined the Marine Corps, I left off I got to boot camp on June 18th, 2006, had no clue what I was getting into. And, yeah, that was kinda it.
Obviously, you made the decision. He flipped a switch. He flipped one of your internal switches, as I call it, man.
Yeah.
He told you, hey, you may as well go play college because you're not gonna, you wouldn't make it as a Marine. And to me, that was your internal switch, and he figured out a way to trigger that internal switch. Um, and so now, fast forward, you're with the, are you with the state platoon or are you with Scout Snipers?
Well, so I went in as infantry. I mean, I had no clue what a sniper even was, and, went in as a basic infantryman, obviously went to boot camp, went to Camp Geiger, North Carolina, graduated, and
Yep.
then went to where I was stationed at 3rd Battalion, 3rd Marines in Hawaii. And, I got there and man, I check in on the first day, and, we get there late. They come pick you up on these white buses that we've all been on, and they bring you back, and they're dropping you off at the you pull into your new home, and it's a barracks, and it's a barracks down there called Mackey Hall. It's a famous barracks. Now they're tearing it down. Famous barracks. Famous, and it's famous in a way of that it's the worst barracks in the United States Marine Corps. Just so you know what it's famous for.
Yeah.
And we pulled in, and I think it was like the first taste of just I we pulled in, and all the seniors are standing it's 3 decks on the external decks, right? And they're standing on them, and, like, as soon as we pull in, you just hear beer bottles start hitting. And these guys, I know when I say that it makes them sound terrible, but these guys had just came back from the Haditha Triad, and we were walking into rooms that should have been their friends that they lost, and we were backfilling the rooms of people that died. And I mean, they had just gotten back. And so, you roll into that, and you got a bunch of 20, 21 year olds, right? 20, 21 year olds, just trying to deal with that. Just in knowing that, look, we get off the bus, and they got to start preparing us to go to what they just came from. And so obviously I didn't realize it then. And so I got there, and I was so fortunate to be under a squad leader named Danny Kreitzer. And so he was my squad leader, and just a really good guy. So worked under him for a little bit. And then I see these guys running around on base, and they just look different, right? They carry themselves with a higher, like, just in a higher regard. And so I was like, "What are they?" And so I found out that they're called snipers. And so I was like, "Well, how do I become one of them?" And then fortunate for me, it was just timing. And you know as well as I do, combat, whether you see combat, whether you don't, whether you get in a gunfight, whether you don't, like, all these things, a lot of the time is about timing. And so an opportunity. And so for me, like, right after that, they were doing an indoc, and they were only going to do an indoc because they needed O3s as security. Like the stay mission had started switching from the old regular two-man mission, and it started moving because of the urban environments and the way that the enemy operated. It started moving into a more surveillance aspect of it. So they started moving into six-man teams. And so they needed two security people, and they wanted them from their own platoon and train their own up instead of taking infantry guys, or instead of guys from the platoons. And so I ran the indoc, made it, and then I was like, you weren't supposed to be able to have an opportunity to go to school or any of that. And I was getting ready to go home on pre-deployment leave, and they said, "Hey, there's a school slot open, and you're the only one that is qualified to go."
Oh, snap.
And I was like, I'm in. I'm in." And so went to sniper school. Um, I think I started sniper school in like April of '07. And it was no easy school back then, right? I mean, it was the probably had the highest attrition rate of any school in the Marine Corps. And so I ended up going to sniper school, and it was two taco 7. Barely graduated, but graduated my first time through, and then left, for Iraq, Fallujah, Iraq in 2007.
Oh, wow. So, for me, I was stationed with First Marine Division. I was there for the initial invasion. I was the combat team platoon sergeant, and I had my own, security teams, for the invasion. And I just remember thinking to myself when we were over there, that I aligned with the same triggers that caused me to join the Marine Corps, right?
Uh,
And so what I'd like to do is get into the Battle of Ganjgal with you a little bit,
Yeah.
and really talk about that, because I wouldn't be doing any justice if we didn't talk about that. Because I think for you, Dakota, I think that the same triggers were flipped in you, when the fight was on, when you guys realized that you guys had thunder raining down on you, from the hilltops all around you in that province. Because as and for the viewers out there that don't know, Afghanistan terrain is treacherous. It's
Yeah.
it's just it's the topology over there is horrific. It's cliffs everywhere, and the mount is very mountainous and very arduous. So I think, and I want to hear it from your perspective, Dakota. Like when you guys realize you're in this fight, you're on the outs of the centric area where this fighting started,
Yeah.
and you realized it's all, coming to fruition right now. Talk to me about that Battle of Ganjgal and how that trigger was flipped in you to do the thing you were called to do.
I think a lot of times we try to church this thing up, and we try to make it. I like to say we like to romanticize these things. Um, I think when you talk about courage, and you talk about like what you do in these moments of uncertainty or anything, whether you hear these words called courage or resiliency or any of that. They're all those are the same words. It's just how you're applying it to the situation, the context, and the emotion that you tie to it. You know what I mean?
Yep, yep.
And really what it comes down to is how much do you believe in what you're doing, why you're doing it, if you can do it, and and that's what it comes down to. So, if you're talking about me sitting back at the objective rally point, which is like basically a place where we staged our vehicles so that they could walk in, and hearing the severity of the situation. um I don't know if anything. I, I thought everybody would do that. And I still feel that way, right? I still believe that anybody that was sitting in my seat that day, hearing what I heard, and the information that I had, I still believe that they would have done the same thing, right? And why? Because it was the right thing to do. Um, and that's how I see it. And so, like, yeah, was there a switch? Yeah, but that switch doesn't just turn on. Like people who believe that they just rise to the occasion is that they're living on an insurance policy that if they ever have to claim it, they are going to fail miserably. And and what I was so fortunate of is that's what I was surrounded by. And so when that moment came, like the decision of that moment in that test was already decided the micro moments that led up to that years prior to that. And so
Right on.
I don't think the switch just flips. Like if it doesn't flip in every moment, how you do one thing is how you do everything.
Everything. Yep. Absolutely. I have to agree, man. I think that switch for you was flipped, long before that battle started, right? And it was, a lot of people say it's instinctive, Dakota, but you know as well as I do, it's just reactionary. It's the right
Yeah.
thing to do, and it's programmed into your brain housing group, right?
Yeah, and it's not easier the day it happens. Like you're talking about you're having to make the decision. Like you don't just like I was talking to somebody about this in the fire service 2 days ago. You don't just make like people think you just make the decision once and then you just go do it. Like no, you have to fucking make it sometimes every step. Like you have to like you have like your
Right.
whole body is literally looking at this saying you're gonna fucking die. Like in at no point does your body just do you just have this surge of, this badassery come out of you and you're just like, let me get on my horse with my sword and ride into it. No,
Yeah.
you are scared to death. And anybody who says anything else, they've never been in combat, or they're liars, one of the two.
Yeah.
Like there's no in between. And
Yep.
like you have to keep making that decision. And so, but all the being able to continuously make that decision is rooted in the habits that you formed before that. Like if you cheated yourself in the gym, if you cheated that set and told and lied to yourself and justified why you didn't have to do it, or if you went out on missions, when we were doing training missions and you all went out there and you all slept the whole damn time because you knew nobody was coming, right? Like if you were doing shortcuts in training or in life or in everything else up to that point and justifying it, and people justify it all the time, and this is why I think it's so dangerous. They justify They justify it by, "Well, I'll rise. I'll do it when I need to. I'll do it when it's real."
Sure.
And they don't understand that they won't. And so, for me, man, like I loved my teammates. Like I was no badass. I am not a badass. Like I am not anything special. Um, there's no special bone in me. I am if I got to be in the category of average or whatever you call that, that would probably be like an honor if I could even get that high in a level of a human being, right? But I love people, and that's what it came down to.
Dude, I love that, man. And listen, man, as one NCO to another one, non-commissioned officer for you viewers out there that don't know the jargon, and with two Marines having combat experience, listen, I'm just going to tell you from one man to another. Dakota, had you not been there on that mountain that day,
Uh,
all those other dudes that made it possible to be alive would not be alive. And that's just a fact. And for whatever reason, I believe God put you on that mountain in that moment, in that space, to do exactly what you were there and called to do. And so let's not make light of that.
yeah.
Uh,
I mean,
you know,
I do believe we all are where we're supposed to be, right? I think every point in life we are always where we might not we're, for sure definitely more times than not where we want to be, but I do think we are where we're supposed to be, right? I do think that, and I do think that I was on the side of that mountain in Afghanistan. I got there whatever reason I got there for, and I was where I was supposed to be in order to do whatever I was supposed to do. And I don't necessarily know that it was about saving anybody. I mean, who knows? Maybe it was about learning the lessons of that and being able to go and continue to talk about it, right? Like
Sure.
you just don't know, like, what it means, or why it's there, but it's your job. It's not your job to decide if you're there or not. It's your job to do what you can, and to be tested, and it's your job to turn that into how you're gonna help the greater good.
Sure. And for your teams, right? For your Marines, because you have an obligation and a responsibility, especially, back then, young, young Dakota Meyer was an NCO, and you have an obligation as an NCO to bring your Marines back.
Mhm.
It's the same exact responsibility that I had as a combat team platoon sergeant. I got to bring all these Marines back, and even up to the point where we saw a lot of action in Iraq. And it was a dogfight to get from Kuwait, where we were, all the way into Baghdad to take the capital of Iraq, right? And so for me, it was all about leadership. And I used to tell the Marines, train now, train hard, take it serious, because everything you do now prepares you for the moments that are to come. And believe me, when they do come, you're going to do a brain dump. You might be the best, most well trained Marine, recon, Navy SEAL, but when you encumber action, you're going to do a brain dump. And so you have to rely on your muscle memory to get you through that.
Yeah.
And I think, and obviously all about that, man, because here's young Dakota Meyer in the moment, in the situation of that battle of Ganjgal, and it all came, to a head in that moment where whether you were prepared for it or not, it was there, and it was staring you dead in the eyes, and you had to make some quick decisions. And so what I find ironic, Dakota, and I want to get into, your leadership now and what you're doing is, if you recall your conversation with President Barack Obama when you're having a beer with him in the Rose Garden,
Yeah.
you're talking to him about, hey, how did you become successful? And he's giving you advice in the Rose Garden. And one of the pieces of advice he gave you was, don't make, he doesn't like to make hasty decisions. Well,
Yeah.
you're saying that to a combat Marine who had to do the absolute abstract of that and make hasty decisions in a real world scenario. So it's almost like, well, President Obama, really, was that the right advice to give, Sergeant Meyer in that
Yeah.
moment? Don't make hasty decisions. And listen, I'm not a political guy. I don't get into politics at all, much like you do not, I'm sure. But you know, sometimes you have to make hasty decisions, and sometimes that's the best time to make those decisions, is in real world scenarios, because that's all you got. All you have are hasty decisions, and they have to be made quickly. So very ironic. I saw that and thought I would,
Yeah, look, here's what I tell you is do you ever see people, like, try to give you parenting advice and they don't have kids?
yeah,
I
absolutely.
mean, like, my favorite thing, or you got these dog moms and dads, right? These dog parents, and they try to give you advice on how to raise your kids. I mean, nothing against
Yeah,
dog, right? But look, I think that people, here's what I believe, and this is what I do. I mean, you could imagine people telling me what they think I should do, or their opinions. I think people can only give you a perspective or advice based off of the experiences that they have experienced.
sure,
And to be honest with you, there's a reason that he has the education and he's in politics, and we were wearing the nation's cloth, ridding the world of evil. Like, there's a reason, right? There's a reason that a guy
sure,
goes to Harvard, and he doesn't suit up in a uniform and go fight for his country, right? Like, neither one's right, neither one's wrong, but, you know, uh, and that's the kind of the problem with the world today is we got a bunch of people out there with education. We probably have a demographic of human beings today that are, and I'm not just saying like college wise or degree wise, but probably the most educated as far as having information and all that. We have a society of the most educated human beings on the face of the planet. But sometimes we wrap up into two things: education and knowledge. With
Sure.
us, it kind of came, we got the knowledge before the education, right? Like in knowledge, you call it street smarts, whatever you want to call it, right? Experience, wisdom, that's what knowledge is. Education is different. Education is you've read about it, you've heard about it, you've learned about it, but you've never done it, right? And
Sure.
there's a ton of education out there. The population is absolutely so educated, and they're dangerous because they have no knowledge with it. And so we got a bunch of experts out there that have never done it, right? Like you
Yeah.
got a bunch of
Sure.
experts that have never done it. And they are, I mean, it's like that Marine in the Marine Corps that chose to go school themselves out and has never even had a round fired at them, right? It's like a lieutenant
Yeah.
that shows up to a platoon. You know what I mean? I mean, think about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
You remember a lieutenant who
Oh
comes in,
yeah.
the he's older. He or she is older, right? They're older. They've gone to college. They're educated. They come in, and you've got a lance corporal that's been in for 3 years, 2 combat deployments, and now you got this young idea fairy there. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
I got it.
Absolutely,
I got
man.
it in theory and in the book that you read at your war college. That's how we should do this.
Textbook. Yeah.
But let me tell you how we're really going to do it.
Yeah.
So back to the whole thing is look, I hope he can make decisions that way, right? I would say as
Sure.
president of the United States, I mean, you probably do want to think about things a little bit more than, you know, Corporal Meyer on the side of a mountain deciding if I'm gonna, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. Yeah.
but um but that's what we do. Like, I think the worst thing is I call it paralysis by analysis. And you see that. It gets people killed.
Yeah. It does.
I would rather
Complacency.
I would rather make a decision and fail than to not make a decision. Like you have to
Oh
make
yeah. Yeah.
a decision.
That's right. And I heard an awesome quote the other day. I will be buried with those who fail. I will be buried with those who succeed, but I will not be buried with those who didn't try. And I
You
think
know,
that's awesome, man.
you know, not trying, like not people talk about this word failure. Not failing is a failure in its own.
Absolutely. That's well said, man. That's
You
well
know,
said.
think about that. Like not failing. If you're not getting up every day and if you're not failing more than you succeed, well, you're not in the right, you're not getting better.
Love it. Yeah. Absolutely, man. And I think to me, Dakota, that's where I see your advocacy shining the most, man, because not only coming from the perspective of a combat Marine, you know, combat didn't come to us. We went to combat, right? It's like we went to the fight. And that's typically what we do. We're trained to go to the fight. We don't let the fight come here. And
Yeah.
so I feel like there's so much leadership that's, um, going through your skin. And before we run out of time here, the recording time, I definitely want to get through, your leadership and what you're doing now. And we can even follow through even after the recording session ends. But leadership, you're all about advocating for different people. You've got different programs going on, Dakota, and I want to get into that for a minute, um, because it's important that you've not only provided service when you were in the Marine Corps and you served your nation, but now you continue to serve. And can you talk to me a little bit about that? What you're doing now?
Yeah, look, I I continue to serve. The biggest piece for me is transition. I think it's the most pivotal point of us in civilian world. If we want to bring these men and women back into society, we've got to fix this transition point. It's a point where I think these people get out and they become the disabled veteran for the rest of their lives, and it's because it's their only way to earn, and so or they think. You walk into all these VSOs, you go to the Legion and you ask them for help and they're patting you on the back, we'll get you 100%. I mean, that's the goal from them, right?
Yep. Yep.
We need veterans out there advocating. We need them as teachers, as doctors, as lawyers. Anytime in history, I mean, you look at one of the best times that our country was doing was after World War II, and it was because veterans were integrating back in society at a point in time where society is having to take care of its veterans and veterans aren't taking care of its society.
Yeah, man.
We got a big problem, and that's where we're at right now. So, like, you know, with the transition process, that is the big point for me of being able to help.
Sure. And so, speaking about that, what kind of a legacy or impact do you want to make on the world and the people around you, Dakota?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to change the world. I've got one goal, and that's to change the world. Right?
I
Like
love it.
it's been that way since ever since I got asked that first question. I think Jocko Willink asked me on his podcast, and he's like, so what now? And I just said, I just want to change the world, right? And and what does that mean? Like people, people ask that, and it's like, it's it's every day. It's every day when I get up. Whether I'm a firefighter, whether I'm going on a call, whether I am walking in front of a school. Like I spoke at my daughter's school yesterday, and I talked to these kids about kindness, about love, about respect, about courage. Whether it's getting on a podcast like this, advocating for veterans, whether it's walking through an airport, right? Like, you know, we've got to put hope back in society. Like we've got to,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
And there's all of us, all of us as veterans know how to do that. I mean, we've done it. We've had to do it. We've had to do it in the most harsh environments. We've been giving, I believe this, right? And again, like, people can eat me up or not, but you know, man, we were given this sacred knowledge. Like we were chosen to have this sacred knowledge of truly love at its greatest moments. And the power of it. Not just from the love of each other, but the love of our country. I mean, you every gunfight we were in, did any of those guys think that they were wrong, the enemy?
That's right. Yep.
No, they
You're
didn't.
absolutely right.
They believed in their cause just as much as we did. And
Sure.
and so we've seen the power of love on a battlefield where two human beings are willing to take each other and kill each other over a belief that they can't see, they don't know. And
Yeah.
so for us here as veterans, we've got to integrate back in society, and we've got to show that same and empower people with that same love in everything that they do for each other as human beings,
Well
right?
said, man. Yeah,
And when we don't do that, we're wasting the knowledge that was given to us.
absolutely. And I think, you have found your purpose, man. And I think, I tell everybody all the time, you have to align with your purpose. And if you don't know what that is, go out and find it. And a lot of guys find it, on the yellow footprints in Parris Island, South Carolina. A lot of guys find it, being a firefighter or EMS or police.
Yeah.
So in transitioning, the podcast today, I definitely want to thank you for joining us on the Secure the Perimeter podcast, Dakota. It's an honor to have you here, man. It's an honor to talk about your story and your experience, your combat experience, especially in the Marine Corps, and what you're doing now, man. I think it's vital what you did in the Marine Corps, but it's even more critical what you're doing now because you're in the here and now and you're serving people, and I just love that, man. So, where can people find you?
Yeah, no, thank you so much, and thank you for what you're doing, right? I mean, all of
Yep.
it matters. I mean, it's just like in the Marine Corps, like, we might have been squeezing the triggers, but if somebody didn't get us the guns, somebody didn't get us the ammo, somebody wasn't paying our families, somebody didn't make sure that we were paid, somebody didn't fuel up those, order that. I mean, it takes all of us. It takes all of us. Like to think that any of us can do anything without each other is absolutely insanity.
Sure.
So thank you for what you're doing, man. And
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
badass. Thank you for your service. And um, you can find me dakotameyer.com. That's probably the central hub. Dakota Meyer 0317 on Instagram, LinkedIn, all those things, always out there, um, trying to push that needle.
Sure. Yeah. So for you viewers out there that are looking for the next step, if you're looking for some inspiration, follow this guy, read his story, read about him, um, and I think you'll find yourself very inspired. So we'll wrap it up here. And again, Dakota, thank you for joining us on the Secure the Perimeter podcast. And until next time, we hope to have more inspirational stories for you guys out there.